Hello, welcome to my kitchen. If you didn't know, my name is Liv. I'm an independent author. My current project is a sorority romance novel with an autistic main character with an estimated release date of fall 2026. This video is a little bit later than I wanted it to be, but I have not had time to film until today. So here I am. So as you can see by the title of the video, I'm going to be talking about my experience writing autistic characters as an autistic author. And this is going to be the first in a series of videos that I make, because I do plan to do deeper dives with Saving Summer and with eventually Violet's novel when I have a proof copy of it. But so this is kind of going to be the first in a series, I guess you could call it. So basically this video is going to be going over the more surface level-y things versus the next when I go through Saving Summer and eventually Violet's novel, and kind of point out more specific lines of dialogue that I find to be particularly of importance. So without further ado, let's just jump right into this video. So essentially, these two projects serve to tell two different sides of my experience. As I said in my author's note for Saving Summer, I'm like, this is a side that I do want to tell, but there is another side that I want to tell as well. But I'm like torn on whether this camera is in the right place or not. But yeah, my focus with Saving Summer was sharing the experience of feeling lost, knowing there was something different about you, but not really knowing how to put a name to it, and dealing with the stigma, both with and without a diagnosis, like a stigma of a potential diagnosis and the stigma that would be implied, if that makes sense. Dealing with the stigma, not just as somebody who is diagnosed, but as somebody who is potentially seeking a diagnosis, if that makes sense. Those were the things I wanted to focus on with that one. Whereas with Violet's novel, it's going to be focusing more on, you know, this is who I am, watch me take on the world. Not me, literally, but just those are the two different sides to the autistic experience that I've experienced that I want to share through my characters. Because as I said in my author's note for Saving Summer, like, it is a very sad reality, but it's still a reality, and it's still important to talk about what the stigma can do to people, and what not having a diagnosis can do to people as well. But Violet will be showing another very important perspective, which is the one with more hope and optimism, because those are both realities, and both realities can exist for the same people. As you can see, I had Summer's reality with her diagnosis or lack thereof, and now I have mine, which is more similar to Violet's reality. So I'm just gonna go a little bit more into detail about each project. Like I said, I will be making fuller, like, deep dive, what was that? I will be making fuller deep dive videos about them at some point when I have Violet's proof copy, which will be like in 2026 probably. But I can do Saving Summers sooner than that. But just to talk about kind of like an overview of what I was focusing on with Saving Summer, I want to talk about the impact of the stigma, for sure, the impact on socialization and knowing social cues and knowing how to function within society the same way everybody else does, or rather not being able to have that come to you as easily, being able to get a diagnosis or not being able to get a diagnosis, and just the effect that that can have, as well as being able to get services, or not being able to get services. And I like the importance of being able to get services and just not having the stigma or the lack of a diagnosis in the way of that, as well as the impact of the lack of diagnosis, or like starting to get a diagnosis and then obviously that not panning out because of the stigma, and just thinking about like, okay, and I wanted to focus on kind of like, and I wanted to portray kind of like the feeling of like, I can finally put a name to this thing that is different about me, but at what cost? Because it's gonna come with this stigma. Like, I can get help, I can get services, but it's gonna come with this stigma. So kind of like the the pros and cons of being able to get that diagnosis, especially for somebody who is high school aged, especially for somebody who is in a social circle where your peers aren't necessarily as mature and understanding as maybe adults are about that kind of thing. Not to say that adults can't be stigmatizing and bullies, because they very much can, but that was Summer's main worry was the stigma she would face at school if anybody were to find out, if she were to get a diagnosis. And I kind of wanted that to parallel some of my experiences in high school with, obviously I was able to get a diagnosis, unlike Summer. I was diagnosed when I was 14. My parents actually didn't tell me until like a few months after I got my diagnosis. Like, I thought I was going in to get tested for like ADHD or something, like figure out like why I was like failing some of my classes. Like, that's what I thought I was getting tested for in July of 2010. And then it wasn't until November that my parents sat me down and told me. And the reason that they told me, because originally they weren't going to tell me because they didn't want me to use it as an excuse, which I have more feelings about that are for another video. Me and my parents are on better terms now with that whole thing, but that was something that they told me. And they said that the reason that they did end up telling me was because my mom was watching some movie and the main character in the movie had autism, and I had actually, against, like, I wasn't allowed to watch Degrassi, but I had started watching it over the summer when my parents were at home. And I watched the episode where Connor gets diagnosed with well, they called it Asperger's back then, but we don't really use that terminology anymore, so I've been told. And the way they explained what it was, I remember thinking, like, could I have that? Like, that sounds like me, but like, I didn't fit like all of the tropes that that his character embodied, but just the way it was explained, like, he doesn't always understand social rules that are immediately clear to everybody else or like implied to everybody else. I was just like, that sounds like my experience. Like, I have trouble with that, but I couldn't ask my parents about it because they couldn't know that I was watching Degrassi. And then finally, so that was like June before I even got taken in to get diagnosed. But finally in November, my mom was watching some movie about a protagonist with autism, and I asked her what it was about, and she told me, and I said, do you think I have that? And she said, no, of course you don't. And then the next day my parents sat me down and told me, yeah, you have it. And so that's the gist of what happened with me. I'm not going to get into the whole details of all of that, but that's the gist of how I found out, how I was diagnosed and how I found out. My parents bought me a book that night from Borders, rest in peace. I love Borders, gone too soon, forever in our hearts queen. But my parents bought me a book that night, and it was All Cats Have Asperger's or something. I want to say I still have it, but I don't think I have it here at my apartment. I know I kept it, but I remember reading through it in the car and just thinking, like, I was like reading it like a checklist. I was like, yeah, I do that, I do that, I do that. And it was that thing where it's like, okay, I finally have a name for what's wrong with me. But then the name of the thing that was wrong with me was autism, and my only experience with people with autism up to that point had been when I was in 7th grade art class, and a special education teacher came into our classroom and said, hey, just so you know, there's going to be 3 students with autism joining your class. They're from the special education program. There's nothing wrong with them. They just have autism that makes them a little bit different, but you can still be nice to them. And that was kind of my experience. And I did, I'll talk about this more when I do my deep dive into Saving Summer, but there was a nonverbal girl in the mix who my friends and me as teenagers were not very understanding of and nice to, and I kind of used Jean's character to symbolize her, and so just knowing, like, this is what's wrong with me and this is also what's wrong with her, I did a lot of othering myself from the other autistic people I knew, or knew of, and you know, which is, I later learned wasn't good. It's like I later had to unlearn. It was just, I was so scared of the stigma that I was going to do anything I could to other myself from the people who I heard get called the R slur by random people on campus. And I was also going to take very good care to make sure that only very select people found out. I was very, very selective about who I told. Most of my experiences telling people didn't go particularly well, I will say. You know, my friends were fine. Like, they weren't like, I don't know, like, they weren't great, but like they weren't traumatizing. One person my mom told, because basically it was like that, that kind of double-edged sort of like, this can explain why you're like this, but it's also going to open you up to stigma. And instead of giving context for why I was like that, it very much opened me up to stigma, or at least that's what it felt like. Obviously it gave context, but it just, I felt like that experience did not help me, and I did not tell anybody for months, like over 6 months after that. Like, when new people came into my life, I was just like, I am not going to tell them. That did not go well. I am done telling people this. I will take it to my grave if I have to. The people that already know can know, but I just don't claim it, and I'm not going to tell more people about it. And that I will talk more about how I unlearned othering myself when I do my deep dive into Saving Summer. That is something I do want to address. I don't want to just leave it at, yeah, I did that, yeah, it sucked. Like, I do want to address that. It's just to give more, that is just something that I think would go better in my deeper dive. So that's just, I'm not gonna go into the full details of that here. I remember the next time I told someone after that experience was about 6 months later, give or take. And it was kind of an accident. Like, I'm gonna walk y'all through how it happened. And maybe I'll cut it out, maybe I won't, but I'm gonna walk y'all through how it happened. So I was in drama class with two of my, at the time, close-ish friends. And we were talking about, because one of them had known me when I was in middle school, because I was a teacher's aide for a class that she was in, and we were talking about somebody that we both knew, and she was like, yeah, like, he always felt bad for you because he knew something was wrong with you. And I was like in hindsight, like immediately after like this whole conversation stopped, I realized that she was probably talking about the fact that I used to like get extremely dehydrated in the middle of class in 8th grade and like almost black out. Like, that happened like 3 times in her class. That was probably what was being referenced, but in my like brain that was like always on guard for like, somebody might find out, I can't let people see me going into the spec ed classroom, like I have to make sure nobody sees my schedule, I can't let people know, like I was always on guard about that. And to hear like somebody knew something was wrong with me, and I was like, I didn't even know, nobody knew in 8th grade that I had autism. My parents didn't know, my psychiatrist didn't know. I wasn't really seeing a psychiatrist in 8th grade, but like the psychiatrist I had seen up to that point didn't come up. So the fact that my reaction, I was just like, how did he know? And then, so both my friends are now very confused. And I'm like, and then I was like, well, I guess I have to tell them now, because I can't like undo what I've just done. So I ended up telling them, and they both, like, that was the, like, before college, like that was the best reaction I've ever gotten from friends telling them. Like, they were just like, oh, okay. It was like I told them my favorite color. And I just always remember that so fondly, of like that conversation going so well. And then I remember one of them, I don't remember which one, but one of them was like, that helps us to put you in context and like why you do certain things, because, you know, sometimes you do act a little bit weird and we don't know how to tell you that you're being weird, but now it makes sense. And they did at times like point out to me if I was doing something that like broke a social cue or something. Like they were good about that. And for some time after that, I haven't spoken to either of them in years, but I do remember that very fondly. Not gonna get into the tea of any of that, but that was one of the best reactions I ever got from somebody that I told. And just in general, like I said, those friends were very good at like being patient with me and being like, hey, like that's weird what you just did, like just so you know, like here's maybe something you could do to fix it. Most people are not very forgiving or understanding or patient when you violate social cues that in their eyes should have been implicit. And I want to make this very clear. I'm not talking about like overtly problematic things. Like I as somebody with autism never want it to be construed as me using my autism as an excuse for why I did something inappropriate in the past, because there are times in my teenage years that I very much violated boundaries and kind of tried to be like, I'm sorry, I don't know social cues. And like, I am gonna say like, there are some things that just like, it can explain why I did it, but like it's not gonna undo what I did. It's not gonna excuse the fact that boundaries were violated. It's not going to unhurt people that I hurt. And like, these are things that happened years ago that like I still think about, because I'm like, I can't believe that I really thought I could say, but I have autism, and have it be okay for some of those things. And because like I've had experiences with other people with autism who have very much crossed boundaries with me, and the first thing that pops in my head is usually like, you cannot use that as an excuse. And then I think back to like when I was 17, 18, and I was like, but I did that. I did try to use it as an excuse. So like, I try to be a little more patient with people, but like, I don't want to get into this topic really. I'm just trying to say like, I'm not for people using it as an excuse for hurtful actions or violating boundaries, or for like severely violating boundaries. Like, it's more for things like, I didn't know it would be weird if I, like the things that my friends were patient with me about was like, I didn't know it would be weird if I worded a text message this way, or I didn't know if it would be appropriate to send you a message on Facebook because we're friends on Facebook, but maybe you still don't, like maybe you just friend everybody, like things like that. Like, man, learning to navigate social media when it was like what it was in the 2010s was rough for somebody who already struggles with social cues. I can't imagine trying to like start from scratch in today's social media landscape with limited social cues. Like that, like props to everybody out there doing that. Yeah, but moving on from all of that, however much of that I edited out, because I just don't know how to word things sometimes. Like there are things that I feel that are very important to discuss, and I just genuinely, even in these notes that I've had typed out for a little bit now, don't know how to word properly. So we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep going. Basically, even though that interaction with my friends went really well, it still took me a long time to be open about it, and for my fear of people finding out about it to go away. That was just something that I don't even remember when it went away really. I know it was definitely after high school. When I really started being open about it was when I moved to Delaware for college. Like that's when I really like just did not care who knew. And I think I was starting to be a little bit more open about it before that, but it wasn't until I got to Delaware that I was just like, I do not care who knows. I do remember though, I did want to make sure it wasn't the only thing or the first thing somebody knew about me, just because I was like, that's kind of a lot. Yeah. I just want y'all to know, I say a lot more words than what ends up in the final cuts of these. I cut so much. I cut so much out of these videos. Like, I guarantee this will be under an hour long. And I've already like filmed like I'm starting my second 30-minute clip. So, where was I? So, but I'm gonna move on to my experience in college after I started being open and not caring who knew. So when I joined my sorority, which you can't even see it, but I'm wearing one of my shirts because I thought I was gonna be mainly talking about Violet's novel when I started writing these notes. So I set out this shirt for this video, but then I was like, why don't I talk about both? Anyway, when I joined my sorority, I was met with, like, I thought that people, before I joined a sorority, I thought that people who like wholly loved me for who I am, and accepted me for who I am, like, I thought those people were like few and far between. I never expected having a nearly 100 sisters who loved and accepted me for who I was. Like, that was not something I ever would have imagined when I was growing up, when I first got diagnosed, when I had bad experiences telling people, even when I had that good experience telling my other friends. That was just not something that I could have pictured for myself. I remember after I graduated college, or after I graduated high school, I had some friends who were older than me from like theater camp and drama and at school and stuff. And I would see their posts about sororities they were in. And one of my friends from my first year of theater camp was a Delta Gamma at, oh shoot, what was it? Sacramento State? Somewhere in California. And she always looked like she was having so much fun. I was just like drawn to the anchors. Like, there was something about the anchors I was just very drawn to. And, but I kind of had accepted, like, first of all, I don't party. Like, I am not fun in that way. At least at the time I don't really party now per se, but I was a much more sheltered, subdued version of myself back in 2013, 14. And I was like, I'm not fun in that way, and I have autism. Like, the odds of me getting into a sorority when I eventually transferred to university, yeah, like, keep dreaming, Liv, keep dreaming. And so, like, having that experience was just beyond my wildest dreams, and beyond anything I thought possible for myself. And it made me feel more comfortable being open about myself, and less afraid of people finding out. Because even when I was being open, there was still some stigma in the back of my mind, and they really helped me to just, I guess, I don't want to say fully work through it, because I'm sure I still will like always have some kind of work to do on myself with that, but just the amount of stigmatization that just dissolved the longer I was in my sorority, the longer I was surrounded by that love. I just can't put it into words, but I tried. But I tried, because with Violet's novel, I like I said, I wanted her story to be kind of a tribute to that experience, not focusing on specific people, but more specific moments, like I said in my one of my other videos. And I like I said, I am going to go through and do a video when I have the proof copy and kind of talk about some of the key moments that shaped that shaped Violet's character in terms of me implementing my own experience with autism. And then next week's video, or the next video that I make, I am genuinely so busy next week, I do not know if it will be next week or the week after, will be that for Saving Summer. It will be me going through and talking about the key moments that either mirror my experience or were inspired by my experience. With Summer, it was more like, just like what it was like having it and not knowing, with like just having things like routines and sensory issues and knowing something was wrong but not being able to put a name to it, like that kind of thing. So those are the parts. Yeah, so I will eventually have both of those, but Summer is the one that I will be doing next, and I will be wearing one of my Be Kind shirts. They'll be very happy to get out of my storage. But yeah, overall, I had to decide what I wanted to communicate about my experience in both projects, because I mean, while it is possible for a person to have both experiences, the focus of Summer's story, unfortunately, didn't really allow for the part that is going to be present in Violet's story. And because Summer is such a heavy representation of that side of things, I wanted Violet's story to be focused on more the positives and just the path to, not the path to acceptance, but just like the experience of knowing you were diagnosed from a young age, being okay with that diagnosis from a young age, and like not really thinking about the stigma as much, and just living your life. And yeah, you're different, but you're just living. Livin. I might cut that out. And I also had to make it, and I also did work to make both characters' experiences different from my own in ways, because first of all, I don't do self-inserts anymore. That's not what we do here. But also because I am not the national spokesperson for what it's like to have autism. Like, my experience is one of millions, and just because an experience is different than mine doesn't make it less valid. Obviously. So I wanted to make them different from me while still showing important parts of the experience that I had, and letting people with similar experiences know, like, hey, you're not alone in this. Like, somebody knows, like kind of how I felt when I saw that episode of Degrassi, and I was like, there's a word for this. Like, there's a name for this thing. Like, it's not just me. Like, there is a thing. If that makes any sense at all. I will talk a little bit about some of the things I did for Violet's novel, just because it's going to be a hot minute before we have the proof copy, and there are some things that I can talk about without it. For instance, I gave her sort of a self-regulation tactic of counting things, like when she very much finds comfort in counting things, knowing exact quantities of things. The inspiration for that trait, I will talk about in my 5 facts with spoilers video way down the line, because I can't tell that story without a spoiler. But just trust that there was a lot of thought put into that. But her comfort tactic is counting things. When she, like, that's how she self-regulates, self-stimulates, whatever you want to call it. She counts things. And I need to show y'all something, because I put dedication into this project. If any of my roommates at the sorority house in the spring of 2020 randomly heard me going up and down the stairs on both sides of the house one night, I want to explain, like, I have an answer for what that was. I guarantee nobody thought about that in the last, like, nobody is thinking about that, but like, I guarantee that I'm the only one who thinks about this. But I made a note of how many stairs, I don't know if it's focusing, I made a note of how many stairs, May 30th, 2020 at 5 p.m. I made a note of how many stairs it takes to get, how many stairs it took to get to the top floor of the sorority house. And in the front of the building, the first landing was 14 stairs, the second landing was 12 stairs. And in the back, all 4 landings were 7 stairs. So that is how much effort I put into making sure that the things that Violet counts are accurate. And it's to the point where I wanted her counting to be so accurate that there are times where, like, she might mention, like, I was too overwhelmed to count, even, like, she'll be like, I was too overwhelmed to even count, or I don't actually know this quantity and it's stressing me out. Those were times where I just straight up did not have the brain power to get an exact quantity. Like, if I had to count, like, the number of days between something, and I was just, like, at a point where I was just like, I don't know the number of days, and I don't think I can figure it out easily. Easily, because I did walk up and down the stairs multiple times to get the number of stairs in the sorority house, but I just would be like, guess what? She's too overstimulated to count. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it somehow. So that's a little behind the scenes info if you catch any of those moments in the story. Her special interest is old technology. Like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, mostly computers. That is something I am interested in and gained more interest in as I was doing research to write her character. I wouldn't say it's my special interest though. Like, not to say you can't have more than one special interest, but, like, my special interest is The Sims 2. Like, genuinely, my mom and I have joked that, like, instead of, like, if anybody ever needs to verify that I have autism, like, don't worry about my paperwork, just have them ask me any question about The Sims 2, and then 4 hours later when I stop talking, they'll be like, yeah, she's got it. So that's, yeah, if anybody was curious, that's my special interest. I do find old technology interesting, but not on the level that Violet does. And I did learn a lot of cool things doing research to write her character. I wanted to research her character more than I researched more than I researched the characters in Saving Summer, because if you remember, the three representatives of the spec ed department in Saving Summer, Grant, Jimmy, and Jean, well, Grant and Jimmy, Jean doesn't like it, but Grant and Jimmy are obsessed with Minecraft, and that's their special interest. They can go on about it forever, but if you tell them they're being too much, they will shut up. Like they do say that. They do, that is something they bring up. Because they're aware that they can be a lot when it comes to Minecraft. And I did some research, but because they weren't like focused characters, I didn't do a lot of research about Minecraft. Like there are things I'm still learning about Minecraft, like just in passing conversation, being a high school teacher. And so, but because they weren't focused characters, I didn't put as much effort into researching their special interest, whereas Violet is quite literally the focused character, so I wanted to make sure that I had a good basis of her knowledge of her special interest. The other spec ed students in Saving Summer will get more screen time, well, me talking about them screen time in the video where I deep dive into Saving Summer, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about, my experience of like learning not to other myself from the others. That's probably not how I want to word that, but so that's that on that will be something that I talk about more. That's just not something I'm going to get into right now, because I do want some things to have more of a heavy focus in that video when I have more time to go deeper into those things. That video might be an hour, I don't know. Final thoughts. I do want to wrap this up. I do want to say it was refreshing to write Violet's novel and just share my experiences in a positive way, because when I was first diagnosed, the most representation I gave to autistic characters in anything I was writing is I would make them kind of a punchline. Like as a coping mechanism, I'd be like, look at this idiot with no social skills. Look at all the funny things. Like it was like slapstick level funny. It was a bit like I was just like, it was kind of like, I don't know if I want to call it a coping mechanism, but it was kind of like, if I can't be liked, I'm going to be funny. So like, if there's going to be a stigma, I'm going to make it funny. Not realizing that I was like actively making the stigma worse. Thankfully, none of that was ever published. We don't need to talk about all of that, but that was how I wrote my autistic characters, was I wrote them kind of as punchlines to cope with my diagnosis. And I never thought that I'd be using it as a main plot line, let alone in a positive way. So that, it's been a journey writing it, honestly, like being able to like look fondly back on my experiences and just what my sisters meant to me, and being able to share those moments and the positive side of my experience. I did have other projects planned between Saving Summer and the University Story series, but after I was finishing up Saving Summer, I was like, this storyline's too important to put off. This is going to be my next focus project. So that's how we got here. And I am just like, what, 3 weeks away from getting my line edits back? Maybe 4, I don't know, I can't count. I'm not Violet. But anyway, this has been shorter than I thought it was gonna be. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Yeah, I'm tired of kneeling on my kitchen floor. So hope you guys are having a great day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you maybe next week, maybe a little bit later, with my Saving Summer deep dive. And yeah.